Good afternoon, everyone. J. Michael Moore here, and you're at J. Mike's Missives YouTube channel. Wanted to tell everyone thank you for submitting some impromptu questions for me on the Falcons Life message boards. I know it's a slow time of the year, call it the swoon of June or whatever you want to call it, but OTAs just they're not enough to really fill that football need. So we got to wait till training camp at the end of July, and it does really slow down a lot here in the coming weeks when the team breaks from organized team activities and gets about a month off. I know I'm going to take some time off. That's really when it quiets down around Flowery Branch. But thank you again for your questions. I appreciate that everyone looks to me for some answers, and I'll be happy to provide them as I can, keeping in mind that it is hard to kind of see what's going on at some of these practices because they're considered passing camps, and the defensive line and offensive line in particular aren't out there the entire time. They get some extra time in the weight room. So it's really hard to judge some of the things that you would expect to see in pads. So it's really more about cornerbacks, receivers, quarterbacks, to an extent running backs at this time, and kind of see what the defense is doing in pass coverage and what the offense is looking to do in terms of breaking down some of the different coverages thrown at them. So I'm going to jump right in here to the questions here. Thanks again for all you on the Falcons Life message boards. First question, and in fact the first several questions, come from Magnus 23, Roman numerals. Good use of Roman numerals. Don't see that enough these days. So, does Corey Bierman look heavier? Rumor has it he's beefed up. Any idea how much? Funny you should ask, because new weights are getting released a little slowly by each day as the media guide is getting finished. And when all of those are in is when I'll go in and update the bios on the website with all that fresh information. Bierman's is done. He's listed at 241 pounds. He was listed at 241 pounds last year as well. But I've looked at Bierman. He definitely seems to have bulked up, maybe added a little more muscle on his frame, torso. Definitely looks a little more like a true defensive lineman, which he always has been, but a lot of people pegged him as maybe an outside linebacker at the NFL. The Falcons thought he was a defensive end, and now he's starting to look the part more of a defensive end than maybe a guy who could be a tweener 3-4 type linebacker guy. But Corey Bierman bulked up a little bit, but I think he's still lean enough to really get after the passer and do some of those things that the team wants him to do. Next question. Chris Houston was dominant in a few games last year, but still can get lost. What is the deal with him not tracking the ball well in coverage? Heard one blogger say he has a neck injury. Is his ever voiced his concern by the coaches? I haven't heard anything about a neck injury, haven't seen it, haven't heard Coach Smith talk about it. Feel free to email me the link of the blogger you found. I'd be curious to read their thoughts, but that has not been mentioned anywhere in the media that I've seen, and I think you would be able to notice that in particular during games, as if Houston was having trouble turning his head around like I do sometimes when I got a sore neck from sitting in the office chair for too long. So I don't really see that as an issue. I think Chris Houston's just growing as a player. The guy's got a lot on his plate in terms of being able to shut down wide receivers in this league, and the third year is always where you see guys kind of come into their own at a lot of different positions. So keep an eye on Chris Houston. I think he's only going to grow as a player. Number 3, Thomas Johnson has been mentioned frequently and noticeably by BVG. Brian Van Gorder, I'm guessing, need to start using that in some of my blogs. Anyway, how high are we on him? Will he be the 4th defensive tackle? Well, Thomas Johnson, the guy the team signed pretty early in the offseason. I believe he was a futures guy, somebody that kind of comes in that you would normally look at as a player that starts filling in places for camp. You need a lot of guys and create a lot of competition in training camp to build a football team. But he's a guy who's got NFL experience, 2 years, 3 different teams, went to Middle Tennessee State University, and about 305 pounds. He's a larger defensive tackle where I believe Jonathan Babineau is kind of that 290 kind of range. You got some guys who are a little leaner at that position. But at his size, he can start kind of filling that mold of Grady Jackson, and that's what Brian Van Gorder addressed specifically with me earlier in the offseason, is that they're looking for a guy that can bring in and be a plugger when you need one. Trey Lewis is another type guy there too. So if you're going to place him in that 4th defensive tackle range, still probably a little too early to start doing that besides maybe the top 3 guys. Obviously, you've got Jonathan Babineau coming back. You have first-round draft pick Parade Jerry getting in the mix there as well, and Trey Lewis coming back from an injury. So there are a lot of bodies there. Be curious to see how it shakes out. Number 4, with Quinn Ojanaka's legal woes, will we need to address a backup left tackle in free agency? Any hope of El Svitek becoming a left tackle version of Dahlin Clabo? But first of all, with Ojanaka, you can go on AJC.com, and he declined comment on anything that's been reported on there. So I'll defer to that with Quinn Ojanaka. He's also a guy that can back up at a lot of positions on the line. So I think we'll focus right on left tackle right now. Don't forget about Renardo Foster, a guy who went out in 2007 and missed 2008 with his injuries as well, a torn ACL, a guy who is more of a prototypical left tackle size, pretty good pass blocker. So curious to see what he does coming back from injury. And with Svitek, another guy who can play tackle. And from what I've heard and seen in some of the little practice scrums that get going, he is a guy that's cut from the same cloth as Harvey Dahl and Tyson Clay, but also a very nice guy that I got a chance to talk to at the fishing event a few weeks ago, and really happy to be here. I swapped some stories about Kansas City and my time there going through with the Denver Broncos. So very cool guy, and be curious to see what he does in camp. I know the team likes him a lot. Moving on, Jamal Anderson, early reports have indicated that J98, I do know that one, that's a good message board abbreviation, may have gone through a Roddy White type maturation this offseason. What is your take? Well, with Jamal, coaches are still confident in him. He's working hard. He's here. Again, you don't want to really put too much into this point of the offseason because there are no pads, and for the last 2 weeks anyway, the defensive line and offensive line have gone in with about an hour left in practice just to start lifting weights. So they don't work against each other a whole lot, and they also, in team drills, they're not really mixing it up. This is a non-contact. It's just try to get a look of what the offensive and defensive plays are going to look like. So let's reserve, some of those discussions to training camp. Next question. Jason Snelling take the backup fullback role to give us essentially 4 playable tailbacks on the active roster. It's interesting and one that I haven't really thought of, and I know the coaches haven't mentioned it as well. But Jason Snelling certainly has the size to be there, but you have to look at what's happening with the fullback across the NFL. The fullback position is not going away, but it's getting much more specialized and not being used as much play to play. Ovi Mahaley is one of the best fullbacks in the league. So Snelling can definitely step in and do some things there, but I think you're going to see him compete as a tailback, and it's going to be an interesting competition because what he was doing against Thomas Brown there at the end of the preseason last year, that was a highly contested battle for the third running back spot. And Thomas Brown going down to injury kind of, wrote in the book there that Jason Snelling is going to get that job. But both are very qualified, both are very good. So we'll see what happens there, especially since this team only kept 3 tailbacks last year and other teams keep 4. So it'll be interesting to see when training camp comes along how that starts to take shape. Next question. How's the battle between Deku and Moore going? Is there thought or practice with Deku competing with Coleman for free safety or possibly moving Coleman to strong safety? Or is the battle purely between Deku and Moore at strong safety? Good question. I'm running out of time before I got to get off and do some more things with the blog and on AF.com. But I will address this one and also this final question about Von Hutchins. But with Deku and William Moore, you got to realize Thomas Deku's been working at free safety. Brian Van Gorder told me that the other day. So there is going to be some transition there. But with Eric Coleman being able to play both free safety and strong safety, I still think the competition is there with William Moore and Thomas Deku. It's kind of odd because they're very different players, at least in stature and build. William Moore is a very well built, almost looks like a linebacker type guy. He's very strong arms, can get in there and knock the ball out, and he's done that a lot in practice. Where Thomas Deku is more of a fluid, taller guy, looks more like a free safety. But they're both very capable players, and I think the team realizes now, wow, you've got some really good competition there as Thomas Deku, a second-year guy, is starting to mature. But with Eric Coleman being able to play both spots, it's not going to be really a straight-up apples-to-apples comparison, but you're going to get the competition to really separate the guys out. Last question asked about Von Hutchins. Will he be healthy this year and can make the same impact as Dominique Foxworth last year? Well, the thing about this group of corners is that impact is tough to gauge because they're all very young and they all have varying amounts of starting experience. None of them really started for a full season. But Hutchins is a guy, 6-year career, 142 tackles, 16 starts, 2 picks. He's a guy the team went out in free agency and got, wanting him to make an impact right away at nickel. Injury, had other plans, so we'll see where he comes back in now that he's in the mix. But a lot of younger guys who got playing time last year are going to compete as well. So we'll have to wait and see about that one. Thanks again, everyone, for your questions. We'll see you next time.